He never looked back, but everyone followed. This man had the entire Italian mafia at his fingertips, yet he was just a nobody. Meet Bernardo Provenzano, the boss of all bosses. Bernardo lived a life of luxury, throwing money around like it was nothing. Once he even threw $40,000 out of his limo window just for fun, yet no one knew who he was. In fact, if you walked up to him on the street, he could easily pass off as just another tourist in Italy. His face wasn't known by anyone unless you were deep into the mafia scene. He preferred it that way. In 1969, Bernardo became the godfather, the boss of the Sicilian Mafia Commission. At the time, he was only 37 years old. The title meant that he was in control of every single mafia family in New York, Chicago, Detroit, Las Vegas, and many other U.S. states. Not only did he rule over all of them, but he was also the liaison between the Italian and American mafias. He was the guy to go to when both sides couldn't agree. And believe me, there were plenty of times where this happened. This meant that Bernardo could easily make or break any mafia member with just a snap of his fingers. But despite all this power, he kept a low profile and was hardly ever seen in public. In fact, the only reason why anyone knew he existed was because of the few photos that were taken of him throughout the years. To this day, no one has any idea what he really looked like, though. All we have are these grainy images. Bernardo lived in an unremarkable house in the middle of nowhere. It was in this home that he planned his next move. From here, he ruled the mafia like a king. When law enforcement eventually raided his home, they didn't find anything suspicious. They found an old man in his underwear eating breakfast and watching TV. That's right. The most feared man in the world was living a simple life. Just think about that for a second. He was the #1 target of the FBI and police around the world, yet he never got caught. His secret was that he kept a low profile and didn't draw attention to himself. Sure, he would occasionally throw money around, but that was the extent of it. For the rest of the time, he just lived a normal life. No fancy cars, no mansions, no parties, nothing. He kept everything low-key so as not to raise any suspicion. When the police finally arrested him in 2006, they thought they'd finally cracked the case. But little did they know that Bernardo had been 2 steps ahead of them the whole time. You see, Bernardo had been expecting his arrest for years. He'd actually prepared for it well in advance. He knew that once he got arrested, he wouldn't be able to keep his lavish lifestyle, so he hid his money and assets away in secret. He put his wife in charge of managing his affairs while he was gone. She would take care of everything, from paying his lawyers to making sure his family was taken care of. If anything happened to him, she would take over the family business and make sure it continued to run smoothly. Of course, this wasn't part of his plan. But as things started to unravel, he knew he needed someone to hold down the fort. And who better than his own wife? After all, she was the one who'd been by his side through thick and thin. He trusted her implicitly and knew that she would do whatever it took to protect their family. So when the inevitable happened and he got arrested, he left everything in her hands. But Bernardo had done more than just hide his assets. He also made sure that there was no way the police could extradite him to the U.S. Now that may seem like an obvious thing to do, but it's actually not. Extradition is a complicated process that can take years, if not decades. Bernardo wasn't willing to wait around to find out how it would play out. So he made sure that there was no way they could get their hands on him. The FBI wanted to bring him to the U.S. for a number of crimes, including racketeering, extortion, and murder. But thanks to Bernardo's planning, none of those charges stuck. The only thing he ended up being convicted of was a minor tax offense. This meant that he could avoid extradition and remain in Italy. But why did the Mafia even listen to him? After all, he wasn't related to any famous families and had no real connections to the higher-ups. Well, that's because of the way he earned his stripes. You see, the Mafia isn't just about who your relatives are. It's also about what you can do. And Bernardo proved time and time again that he was more than capable of taking care of business. He wasn't born into the Mafia, but he worked his way up from the bottom. And that's something that the members of the commission respected. They saw how far he'd come and knew that he deserved to be at the top. Bernardo was a natural leader. He was charismatic and knew how to get the most out of his men. He was also ruthless when he needed to be and wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. These are all qualities that the Mafia look for in a boss. So it's no surprise that they elected Bernardo to lead them. But as the years went on, Bernardo became increasingly frustrated with the direction of the Mafia. He felt that the old ways of doing things were no longer working and that it was time for a change. This led to a major rift within the organization. The younger members, including Bernardo, wanted to modernize and adapt to the times. The older members, however, were content with keeping things the way they were. They didn't want to rock the boat and risk upsetting the balance of power. This tension came to a head in the early 1980s, when a group of young mafiosos tried to seize power. Bernardo was in the middle of it all. He was trying to figure out what to do when suddenly his father-in-law stepped in. His father-in-law was a powerful mafia boss who had a lot of influence over the younger members. He convinced Bernardo to stay out of it and let the elders keep their power. However, Bernardo wasn't willing to give up. He knew that he had the support of the younger members and that he could win them over, so he started to plot against the elders. He knew that they were vulnerable and that he could take advantage of it. For years, he waited for the perfect opportunity to strike. Then in 1982, it came. A rival mafia family was trying to muscle in on the territory of one of the elder families. This gave Bernardo the opening he needed. He convinced the elders to let him handle it, and they agreed. Bernardo wasted no time. He assembled his men and launched a surprise attack. They took out the rival family's leadership and sent a message to the others. From that day forward, Bernardo was a hero to the younger members and a thorn in the side of the elders. He continued to build his power base and influence over the next few years, all while staying under the radar of law enforcement. In 1989, the time was finally right. Bernardo called for a meeting of the commission and proposed a new way of doing things. The elders were hesitant at first, but they agreed to give it a try. This turned out to be a huge mistake. As soon as Bernardo was in charge, he started to implement his new ideas. He streamlined the organization and made it more efficient. He also brought in new technologies and ways of doing business. The elders were furious, but there was nothing they could do. They had voted Bernardo in and had to live with the consequences. Over the next decade, Bernardo's influence grew and grew until he was the most powerful mafia boss in the world. It seemed like nothing could stop him. But then, in 2006, it all came crashing down. Despite his best efforts to stay hidden, the police finally caught up to him. He was arrested and sent to prison, where he remains to this day. But Bernardo's legacy lives on. He showed the world that it doesn't matter where you start in life. If you work hard enough, you can make it to the top. He was a self-made man who rose from nothing to become the boss of all bosses. He was a true American success story. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe. We'll catch you guys next time.